The ballet mom blocked me from reaching my screaming injured daughter, then told the cop I grabbed her child. When I begged her to stop lying, she tilted her head and said, "Sometimes you have to exaggerate to protect kids." I stayed silent. That was 6 months ago. Last week, she walked into court, heard her own voice on a recording, and couldn't speak for the rest of the day. They called the cops on me and claimed I was creeping on their little girls. You see, my daughter decided to try ballet 6 months ago, and with my wife being deployed overseas, I was the one to bring her to the academy. The first time we went, I felt eyes on me like never before. I was the only dad there, and within seconds heard whispers about how I was potentially dangerous. During the lesson, a mom approached me. No introduction. No hi hello, just, "It's strange that a man wants to be here surrounded by little girls." I immediately understood why the other dads waited in the parking lot. I tried to tell her I was just here to watch my daughter. But how can we be sure? The women here, we don't feel safe with you watching. I felt my blood boiling, but getting in an argument on day one might lead to my daughter getting kicked out. So I gave a sarcastic sure and moved to the corner where I could barely see the practice floor. But that wasn't enough. "That's exactly the angle a creep would pick," a different woman said during my daughter's second practice. I tried to just ignore them this time, but she literally paused the entire rehearsal. She stood up, waved her hand, and started shouting, "Excuse me," in that signature pitch-perfect Karen tone. The instructor walked over. "I saw him recording our daughters." The woman pointed at me. I literally did a double take. My phone is one of those Nokia bricks that takes 240p photos at sloth speed, and it was in my pocket the whole time. I pulled out my Nokia brick to show the instructor, but she didn't even look at it. She outright said, "What's important is not whether or not I actually did it." Sorry, ma'am. What? But that these women clearly feel unsafe with me being here. She told me I would have to wait somewhere else during practices, or she'd have to call the police for recording minors. I remember looking over and seeing my daughter go red. I was so embarrassed for putting her through this. Part of me contemplated just crashing out, but then I'd look insane. And because my daughter's dreams mattered more than anything, and the nearest other academy was 2 hours away, I complied. For weeks, I sat upstairs in the ballet history room where I couldn't see the practice floor. I could have waited in my car, but I wanted to be there so if anything went wrong, I could at least hear it, and then it did. It was 65 minutes into the session when I heard this loud crack followed by a scream, my daughter's scream. This wasn't a normal kid cry either, the kind of cry that makes any parent's stomach drop and face go pale. I flew down those stairs quicker than I thought possible. Then I saw my daughter, on the floor, crying in pain, her ankle bent the wrong way at a 90-degree angle, screaming hoarse. That's when I did what got me into this whole mess. I rushed over to help my daughter, or at least tried, because 3 moms literally formed a wall at the dance floor entrance. "We're sorry about your daughter, but we're not letting a creep near our children." I wasn't even listening to them this time, just pushed past them. Not hard, just enough to get through. The gasps from everyone were theatrical. I dropped beside my daughter. I started examining her ankle, keeping her still, calling 911. She was begging me to make the pain stop. I heard the moms actually yelling at the instructor telling them to get this creep off the floor and threatening to pull their daughters out. Then this little girl, maybe 7, walked over and knelt down. She wiped my daughter's tears. From what I knew, this girl was her best friend here. I touched the girl's shoulder and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." The moms lost their minds immediately. More gasps, whispers. Then I heard one of them. 911? Yes, we have an emergency. Still, I was too preoccupied to care. The ambulance and police arrived at the same time, 10 minutes later. I was climbing into the ambulance with my daughter when an officer tapped my shoulder from behind. The moms were all screaming over each other. "He's a creep! He just assaulted me. He's been recording our daughters for weeks. He just grabbed that little girl." My daughter yelled at everyone, "My daddy is innocent!" But no one listened. I took her hand and told her I'd be right there with her. She nodded and wiped her tears. But then I turned around, and the cop's whole demeanor changed. I saw his face go from sympathetic to almost disgusted when he saw my brown skin. His voice went from unsure to judgmental in a second. "Sir, from what these women are telling me, I'm going to need you to come to the station." "Daddy needs to come with me," my daughter yelled at the cop. He looked past me and at her as if he knew what she needed better than we did. I tried to explain myself, but every word I said was interrupted by the moms. When the officer checked my Nokia and found nothing, he sighed. "Still need to talk to you." He cuffed me as the ambulance doors started closing. "No, don't take my daddy." My daughter tried to get out of her gurney, but pain shot through her and she grabbed her foot. Her hand was still stretched out, extending to where mine should have been when the medics closed the door. Officer's orders. Without another word, the officer turned me around and put me in handcuffs. The mother of the girl who'd hugged my daughter was pressing charges. In the police car, the officer was talking about 15 years in prison, all while the hospital was calling my number repeatedly. When I got to the station, the woman pressing charges was already there. Even worse, her victim's advocate had already arrived. She was comforting her in the lobby, very publicly, while I was led past in cuffs. Everyone stared. I was already convicted in their eyes. The booking process took forever. Fingerprints and photos and forms, while my phone kept buzzing with hospital calls I couldn't answer. They put me in a small gray room with a metal table and 2 chairs, and Detective Porter walked in carrying a manila folder that looked way too thick for something that just happened. He sat down across from me and started pulling out papers, screenshots from some group chat where the ballet moms called me things like the predator dad and that creep who watches our girls. My stomach turned reading their messages from weeks ago, planning how to get me banned, sharing photos of me sitting in the corner during practice. Porter tapped his pen on Karen's written statement where she claimed I violently shoved her when I was just trying to get to Lily. He said 3 other moms backed up her story about assault. The victim's advocate knocked and came in with more papers, statements from moms saying I'd been lurking and making them uncomfortable for months. I kept trying to explain, but Porter just kept reading more accusations, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with the hospital trying to reach me about Lily's surgery. 3 hours passed like this, him showing me evidence that was just twisted versions of me being a dad, when I heard shouting from the lobby. Through the little window in the door, I could see my sister Angela arguing with the desk sergeant, waving her phone around, showing something on the screen. She'd driven all the way from New Haven after my one phone call, and now she was yelling about how they couldn't hold a military spouse while his kid was in surgery. Porter left to deal with the noise, and came back with a young woman in a suit. The prosecutor, who kept calling this a child predator case, even though we all knew that was garbage. She went through the charges one by one: assault, harassment, suspicion of recording minors, each word making it harder for me to breathe. Angela managed to text me that Lily went into surgery crying for me, asking why Daddy wasn't there, and my hands shook so bad I could barely sign the papers acknowledging the charges. They moved me to a holding cell around hour 6, just a concrete box with a bench and a toilet, and I sat there going over every ballet class, every moment, trying to figure out what I could have done different. The other guys in the cells around me kept their distance when word got around I was the ballet dad. Even they could tell this was messed up. I thought about calling my wife on her ship, but couldn't face telling her I'd failed to protect our daughter while she was serving our country. Angela finally convinced them to let her see me for 5 minutes, pressing her face against the bars telling me Lily's surgery went okay, but she was hysterical, wouldn't let any nurses touch her, kept asking for Daddy. She showed me a video on her phone of Lily in the hospital bed saying, "Those mean mommies hurt my daddy," over and over, and Angela grabbed my hands through the bars promising we'd fight this. Porter came back that evening with more evidence. A petition from 3 weeks ago signed by 12 moms demanding I be banned from the academy, dated way before Lily's accident. Karen had been planning this whole thing, just waiting for her chance, and it came when my daughter broke her ankle. That night in the cell was the worst, every sound reminding me of Lily, the drunk guy next door humming something that sounded like the music from her recital last month. I kept picturing her in our kitchen showing me her spins, so proud when I clapped, and now she was alone in a hospital bed because I dared to be a dad who showed up. The next morning, they brought me to court for the bail hearing, and Karen was there with 5 other moms all wearing matching pink scarves like this was some kind of show. The judge, an older woman with glasses, read through the charges while the moms whispered loud enough for everyone to hear about protecting our daughters. My public defender looked exhausted and barely tried, just asked for reasonable bail while the prosecutor called me a flight risk because my wife was military and might help me run. The judge set bail at $25,000, and Angela stood up saying she'd put her house up if she had to, while the ballet moms gasped like someone had slapped them. I'm really curious about how those moms managed to organize against him for weeks before anything even happened. They had screenshots, petitions, and photos ready to go. How did the police not question why all this evidence existed from way before the actual incident? As they processed me out, I heard Karen talking to some guy with a notepad, probably a reporter, saying the community needed to know about predators like me, and I knew my name would be in tomorrow's paper next to words that would follow me forever. The next morning, Angela drove me straight to the hospital after getting me out on bail. The security guard at the pediatric floor entrance looked at his computer screen and then back at me 3 times before holding up his hand. There was apparently a safety alert on my name that flagged me as a potential threat to minors. Angela pulled out a folder thick with papers, including my wife's power of attorney documents, and started arguing with the guard who called his supervisor, who called the floor administrator. 3 different people had to review the paperwork, while I stood there watching other parents walk right past us to see their kids. It took 45 minutes of Angela explaining that I was Lily's father, and showing them court documents proving I had every legal right to be there before they finally let me through. When I reached Lily's room, she was asleep with her foot in a cast that went all the way up to her knee and an IV drip in her tiny arm. The second I touched her hand, her eyes flew open and she started crying and reaching for me with both arms. She kept saying "Daddy" over and over while clinging to my neck so tight I could barely breathe. I held her while she shook and told her I wasn't going anywhere, even though we both knew that wasn't really up to me anymore. 2 days later, a social worker showed up for what she called a mandatory welfare check because someone had called CPS, suggesting Lily's injury might not have been accidental. She set up a recorder on the bedside table and started asking Lily questions while I sat there trying not to look angry. Lily told her exactly what happened, that she fell during practice, that I was upstairs in the ballet history room when it happened, that I only came down when I heard her scream. The social worker wrote everything down and seemed satisfied, but warned me this wouldn't be the last visit since the case was now officially open. That afternoon, Angela came to the hospital with her laptop looking sick to her stomach. She'd found a Facebook group called Fairfield Moms for Child Safety with over 200 members, and my photo posted at the top with the word predator in red letters underneath. The comments were worse than anything I could have imagined, with people saying I was a pedophile, that my wife deployed to escape me, that Lily's broken ankle was suspicious, that someone should check my computer for child porn. Someone had posted our home address with a suggestion that concerned citizens might want to keep an eye on the property. Angela started taking screenshots of everything for evidence, while I sat there feeling like I was going to throw up. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from the Ballet Academy stating I was permanently banned from the premises, and they were reviewing whether Lily could continue as a student given the safety concerns of other families. Mr. Reeves wouldn't answer my calls or respond to my emails. Angela got a text from Grace's mother saying she didn't believe any of the accusations, but couldn't speak up publicly because the other parents would turn on her daughter too. She said everyone was scared of Karen's influence in the community, and nobody wanted to risk their kid being excluded from birthday parties and playdates. On day 5, Lily started physical therapy for her ankle at the Children's Rehabilitation Center. The therapist named Jerome was nice enough, but mentioned he'd heard about our situation from another parent. Even here in a medical facility for injured kids, the story had spread and contaminated everything. Lily kept asking why other moms were pulling their kids away from her in the waiting room, and why nobody would look at us. I didn't know how to explain that sometimes adults act worse than children when they're scared of something they don't understand. That's when the prosecutor's office called to inform me they were adding a charge of endangering a minor because I had abandoned Lily by not accompanying her in the ambulance. My public defender said it was obviously ridiculous since I was literally arrested for trying to help her, but warned it made everything more complicated and increased the potential prison time to 20 years. Angela set up a meeting with a private attorney named Diane Fitzgerald, who specialized in false accusation cases. She looked through all our documentation and immediately identified the problem wasn't the law, but the narrative that had already taken hold in the community. She said we needed to change the story people were telling about me, but that would take time and money, specifically a $15,000 retainer that would wipe out my entire savings account. While I was trying to to figure out how to pay for a lawyer, Angela got a call from Grace's mother, Jennifer, who was crying so hard she could barely talk. Karen had confronted her at school pickup and accused her of supporting a predator because Grace and Lily were still friends. She threatened to make sure Grace was excluded from every playdate and birthday party for the rest of elementary school if Jennifer didn't sign a statement supporting the accusations against me. Jennifer kept apologizing but said she couldn't let her daughter suffer for something that wasn't her fault. I tried to work from home while Lily recovered, but couldn't focus on anything when every email about quarterly reports felt meaningless compared to potentially spending 20 years in prison. Lily started having nightmares about police taking me away and would wake up screaming for me 3 or 4 times every night. She'd started wetting the bed again, which she hadn't done since she was 4, and the pediatrician said it was a trauma response to everything that had happened. I'd lie awake after getting her back to sleep, wondering if fighting this was actually making things worse for her, or if I should just accept whatever punishment they wanted to give me so she could move on with her life. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 7 in the morning, and when I opened it, a young woman with a press badge stood there with a notebook asking if I was Noah Thompson. She said she was from the Fairfield Citizen, and that Karen Whitfield had given them an exclusive interview about how she was protecting the community from a potential predator. The reporter pushed her phone toward me, showing Karen's photo on their website with a headline calling her a brave mother standing up for children's safety. She wanted my side of the story, but Diane had already warned me that anything I said would get twisted, so I just closed the door. The article ran the next morning with my photo on page 3 taken from my work's website under the words, "Local mother stands against suspected predator," and within hours everyone in town knew my face. That same afternoon, the school called saying several parents had complained about Lily being there, and maybe homeschooling would be less disruptive for everyone involved. I told them absolutely not, since Lily loved her teacher Mrs. Peterson and had friends there, but when I picked her up that day, she was sitting alone at the lunch tables while all the other kids ate in groups 20 feet away. She didn't say anything on the drive home, but I saw her watching the other kids through the car window, and her little shoulders were shaking. 2 weeks after my arrest, Angela came to stay with us to help out, and we were making spaghetti when Lily looked up from her coloring book and asked why those mommies hated me. Angela knelt down and told her sometimes people make mistakes about other people, but the truth always comes out, and Lily nodded, saying it was like in Frozen when everyone thinks Elsa is bad, but she's really good. The next morning, Diane called to tell me Jennifer Williams Park had signed Karen's statement, saying she witnessed concerning behavior from me, even though Angela got a text from her 20 minutes later, apologizing and saying Karen threatened to ban Grace from all the birthday parties if she didn't sign. That made 4 sworn statements against me now, and Diane said this complicated our defense significantly, especially since Grace wasn't allowed to talk to Lily at school anymore. Day 18 brought the prosecutor's plea offer through my public defender, who said I should take it since it was just misdemeanor assault with no jail time, only probation and mandatory counseling. He kept saying I'd be a registered offender, but at least I'd stay out of prison, while Diane argued that pleading guilty to anything would validate their whole story and I'd never get my life back. I had 72 hours to decide and spent most of them staring at Lily's baby photos, wondering what kind of future she'd have with a dad who either went to prison or admitted to being dangerous around children. I refused the plea deal on day 21, and within 4 hours Karen had organized what she called a community safety meeting at the Fairfield Community Center, with flyers showing my work photo labeled "Known Threat, Refuse to Admit Guilt" posted on every telephone pole downtown. Angela went to observe and came back pale, saying over 50 people showed up, and Karen spent an hour suggesting I might target other children now that I couldn't access the Ballet Academy. Diane tried subpoenaing the Ballet Academy's security footage from the day Lily got hurt, but Ms. Reeves claimed their system malfunctioned that exact day, which was conveniently the only day in 6 months without any recording. One parent might have caught something on their phone while recording their own kid, so Diane started calling everyone from the class individually, but most wouldn't even answer. Meanwhile, Lily's physical therapy sessions were going well, and her ankle was healing, but she'd developed this anxiety about dancing, where she'd freeze up whenever ballet came on TV. What makes Karen think organizing a safety meeting will help when she knows the truth about what really happened that day? The way she got Jennifer to sign that statement by threatening Grace's friendships shows she understands exactly what power she has over other parents. She used to love watching dance videos on YouTube, but now she'd ask me to change it, saying it reminded her of when the police took Daddy, and I'd feel this rage building in my chest that I had to swallow down because any sign of anger would just prove their point about me being dangerous. Day 22. My boss called saying they'd received concerning information about my legal situation, and while they couldn't fire me without cause, they were putting me on unpaid administrative leave pending resolution of the matter. I asked point blank if Karen had called them, and the HR manager's silence told me everything before she said they had to think about the company's reputation. Without my salary, and with Diane's legal bills piling up, I calculated we had maybe 8 weeks before I'd have to start selling things or pulling from Lily's college fund. That weekend, Angela was at the grocery store when David Whitfield approached her in the cereal aisle looking uncomfortable and mentioned that Karen had become obsessed with this whole situation, spending hours on her Facebook group calling other parents and organizing protests. He didn't say she was wrong exactly, but suggested maybe there was a misunderstanding that could be resolved if the right people talked, and Angela gave him Diane's number, though we both knew Karen would lose it if she found out her husband was talking to us. 3 days later, Diane called me with news that made my hands shake. A woman named Maria Santos had reached out to her secretly, scared but determined to help. Maria had been at the ballet studio the day Lily broke her ankle, and she'd recorded everything on her phone. She showed Diane the whole video in a coffee shop parking lot 2 towns over, where nobody would see them meeting. The footage showed me rushing toward my screaming daughter, while 3 mothers literally blocked my path with their bodies. It caught Karen standing in the background with this small smile on her face as the police arrived. Maria was shaking as she handed over a copy of the video, but said she couldn't come forward publicly yet. Her own daughter still went to the academy, and she knew what would happen if Karen found out. The next morning, the CPS investigator showed up for another visit, and my stomach dropped when she said she needed to interview Lily alone. I had to to wait outside on my own porch for 45 minutes while this stranger questioned my 6-year-old about our home life. Every minute felt like an hour as I paced back and forth on the sidewalk. Lily came out smiling and told me she'd talked about our Friday movie nights and how I do her hair every morning. The investigator seemed more relaxed, but mentioned she'd gotten multiple calls from concerned community members about our situation. The investigation would stay open indefinitely, which meant they could show up anytime they wanted. Angela brought over a craft kit that weekend to cheer Lily up since she was still on crutches from the surgery. They sat at our kitchen table making friendship bracelets while I cleaned up lunch dishes and tried not to think about the bills. Lily made a purple and pink one for Grace, even though they hadn't talked since the incident. She looked up at Angela and said maybe they could be friends again when people stopped being mean to Daddy. That innocent hope that this nightmare would just end someday made my chest hurt so bad I had to leave the room. Diane called that night with information that made everything make sense in the worst way possible. She'd been digging into Karen's background and found 3 other schools where she'd done this exact same thing. At one school, a single father lost custody of his kids after Karen's campaign against him. He got them back 2 years later, but the damage was done, and his daughter still won't talk to him. Another family literally moved to Texas to escape her harassment after she got them banned from every activity in town. Karen had perfected this system of destroying people she decided were inappropriate, and we were just her latest project. David actually called Diane himself a few days later from a payphone at a gas station. He'd found Karen's research folder about me hidden in their home office, and it made him sick. She had screenshots of my wife's deployment schedule from social media and photos of me at the grocery store. There were notes about following me to see if I went anywhere suspicious and timestamps of when I arrived at Ballet. He was scared of his own wife but agreed to testify if he got subpoenaed, though he wouldn't volunteer. The preliminary hearing finally arrived after 3 weeks of waiting, and my lawyer warned me it would be rough. Karen showed up with 15 other mothers, all wearing matching purple ribbons that said, "Protect our children," in gold letters. The prosecutor presented witness statements from 6 mothers claiming I'd been aggressive and threatening at the ballet studio. Diane got her turn to question Detective Porter, and she went hard at him about the investigation. She asked why he never properly examined my Nokia phone to verify it couldn't record video. She asked why he never interviewed my injured child, or questioned why mothers physically blocked me from reaching her. The judge kept a poker face, but I could see him taking notes when Diane pointed out the inconsistencies. After 6 hours of testimony, the judge said he needed time to review everything and scheduled another hearing. I thought the worst was over until I got home and found red spray paint across our garage door. The word predator was written in huge letters that could be seen from the street. Lily saw it before I could block her view and asked what that word meant. I told her it was just a mean word that wasn't true while Angela helped me paint over it. We both knew it would happen again, but I installed security cameras that night anyway. The next day, my wife finally got through on a satellite phone from her ship. I'd been putting off telling her everything, but she could hear it in my voice that something was wrong. The silence after I explained everything stretched so long, I thought we'd lost connection. Then she said she was applying for emergency leave immediately to come home and help us. I begged her not to because we needed her income more than ever with the legal bills piling up. Leaving deployment early would hurt her career, and she'd worked too hard to throw it away now. She was crying on the other end of the line, thousands of miles away, and helpless to protect her family. 2 days later, Karen saw Maria talking to Diane outside the courthouse, and everything went to hell for Maria's family. Within 3 hours, Maria's daughter was uninvited from 2 birthday parties and a sleepover she'd been excited about for weeks. Maria's phone blew up with messages from other parents calling her a traitor to child safety. One mother actually wrote that Maria was enabling a predator and should be ashamed of herself. Maria stood firm and kept the video as evidence, but warned Diane that other parents were watching what happened to anyone who helped us. That same week, Lily's teacher, Ms. Johnson, reached out to Diane through a secure email. She'd been documenting every incident of Lily being excluded and bullied by kids whose parents were in Karen's group. One boy had pushed Lily off the playground equipment and said his mom told him not to play with her. Another girl ripped up Lily's drawing and said her daddy was bad and going to jail. Ms. Johnson had reported everything to the principal, but was told it was a delicate situation that needed careful handling. She sent Diane copies of all her incident reports, which showed a clear pattern of targeted harassment against my daughter. 3 days later, Diane called me into her office with a stack of papers that made my heart race. She'd drafted a countersuit against Karen for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and harassment. The process server would deliver it to Karen during her Thursday morning Pilates class at the country club. I watched from my car across the street as the server walked into the studio at exactly 10:15 a.m. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Karen in her pink workout gear doing some kind of plank when the server approached. She stood up confused, took the papers, and her face went from annoyed to shocked to furious in about 3 seconds. The whole class stopped to stare. Someone was recording on their phone for Instagram, and later that day, the video went viral in our town's Facebook groups. For the first time since this started, Karen was the one on the defensive. That same afternoon, Ms. Reeves from the Ballet Academy called Diane in a panic. The security system that had been broken for months was suddenly working again, and she'd found all the old footage backed up on the cloud. She offered to hand it over if we didn't name the academy in our lawsuit. The footage from the day Lily got hurt showed me sitting in the upstairs room the entire time, completely destroying their claim that I'd been negligent or anywhere near the other girls. Diane accepted the footage but made no promises about the lawsuit. 2 days later, David Whitfield showed up at Diane's office looking exhausted. He'd moved into the Hampton Inn after Karen found out he'd been talking to us. She'd gone ballistic when served, thrown a glass at him, accused him of betraying their family. She threatened to tell everyone he'd been inappropriate with their own daughters if he testified against her. He was recording everything on his phone now, documenting her threats. The perfect suburban family everyone envied was falling apart behind closed doors. Then Karen escalated things beyond our local drama. She called my wife's commanding officer at the naval base, claiming I was an unstable predator who shouldn't have access to any military information through my spouse. The JAG office opened an investigation that same day. Maria taking such a huge risk by sharing that video makes me wonder how long she'd been carrying carrying that guilt around watching this whole thing unfold. My wife had to sit through interviews about our marriage, my character, whether I posed a security risk. Her fellow officers looked at her differently now. A stranger 3,000 miles away was trying to destroy her military career because I'd pushed past her to help my injured daughter. When Lily went back to school with her cast, things got worse. I watched her at recess from the parking lot where I was waiting to pick her up. She sat alone on a bench while the other kids played. A boy walked up to her, and I saw his mouth moving, saw Lily's face crumple, then watched my sweet girl shove him hard enough that he fell backwards. The school called me immediately. The principal suggested again that homeschooling might be best for everyone. In the car, Lily told me the boy said his mom told him I was dangerous and going to jail. My 6-year-old daughter was getting harder, angrier, and it broke my heart to see her innocence disappearing. That evening, Jennifer Brown Park called Diane directly. Grace's mom was having a crisis of conscience and wanted to recant her statement. She admitted she'd lied about me grabbing Grace inappropriately. She had text messages from Karen coaching her on exactly what to say to police, basically proof of witness tampering. But Jennifer was terrified because Karen had made it clear that anyone who betrayed her would be destroyed socially and financially. She provided the texts, but begged us not to reveal she was the source yet. 3 days later, we sat in the prosecutor's office as she reviewed everything. The security footage, Maria's video from the recital, Jennifer's recantation, the text messages. The prosecutor looked less confident, but still insisted the assault charge stood because I had made physical contact with the mothers when pushing past them. Diane argued it was reasonable force to reach an injured child. Then came the offer. All charges dropped if I agreed not to pursue the civil suit. They wanted this to go away quietly. While Diane and I discussed options, Angela took Lily for a girls' day to get her mind off everything. They went to get their nails done at the mall. Angela texted me a photo of Lily picking purple polish, the same color as the safety ribbons Karen's group had been wearing. Lily didn't know the connection, just liked the color. She was smiling in the photo, her first real smile in weeks. These tiny moments of normal kid stuff felt like major victories now, but Karen wasn't done. Her lawyer filed a motion claiming I was harassing her by pursuing legal action after she'd simply tried to protect children. The irony was completely lost on her. She posted in her Facebook group about me using the legal system to silence a protective mother. Her followers started a GoFundMe that raised $30,000 in 2 days for her legal defense. We were paying everything out of pocket while she got crowdfunded support from people who only knew her version. The next morning, Ms. Johnson called Diane privately. The principal had reprimanded her for taking sides after she refused to sign a statement supporting the school's neutral stance on the bullying. She was considering whistleblowing about the administration's complete failure to protect Lily from the harassment. Another crack was forming in the wall of institutions that had failed us. 3 weeks later, Diane called me with news that made my hands shake. David had walked into her office that morning carrying a small USB drive and looking like he hadn't slept in days. He sat down across from her desk and pushed the drive forward without saying a word at first, then told her it was a recording from their bedroom 2 nights after my arrest when Karen thought he was asleep. Diane plugged it in right there, and we both listened on speaker as Karen's voice filled the room, talking to someone on the phone about how she knew I never actually recorded anything, but sometimes you have to exaggerate to protect kids from potential threats, and how men shouldn't be at ballet classes anyway, because it's just not natural. She went on for 20 minutes describing how she'd organized the other mothers weeks before Lily got hurt, telling them stories about other cases of men at dance studios, creating a plan to get me removed one way or another. The recording ended with her laughing about how easy it was to get everyone on her side because people always believe a concerned mother over some random dad. Diane's eyes went wide as she saved multiple copies and immediately filed it as evidence, telling me this changed everything. The next morning, Channel 8 ran a segment titled Rush to Judgment, featuring an interview with our side of the story for the first time. Karen's Facebook group exploded within minutes with posts calling the reporter biased and demanding people flood the station with complaints. But something different happened this time. Other parents started commenting underneath asking questions, wondering if maybe they'd gotten caught up in something. One mother even writing that she'd never actually seen me do anything wrong and was starting to feel guilty. The station got hundreds of calls, but they weren't all complaints anymore. Some were people sharing their own stories of being falsely accused or admitting they'd joined the mob without thinking. 3 days later, I drove Lily 40 minutes away to a physical therapy clinic in the next town where nobody knew our names. She was walking better now, the limp barely noticeable, and the therapist said she might even be able to dance again in a few months if she wanted. But when classical music started playing from the speakers in the waiting room, I watched her whole body tense up, and she grabbed my hand so tight it hurt. "I don't like ballet music anymore, Daddy," she said quietly, and I felt another piece of my heart break, knowing Karen had stolen something beautiful from my little girl. That afternoon, Detective Porter called asking me to come to the station, and when I arrived, he was standing in the lobby looking uncomfortable. He led me to a conference room where the prosecutor was waiting with paperwork spread across the table. They told me all criminal charges were being dropped effective immediately due to lack of evidence and witness credibility issues. Detective Porter cleared his throat and said he owed me an apology, that he'd let his assumptions cloud his judgment, and he was sorry for what happened to my family. I wanted to feel relief, but all I could think about was how my mugshot was still floating around online and how the arrest record would follow me forever, even though Diane said we could get it expunged after the civil case. Within hours, Karen had posted on every platform that the dismissal just proved the system protects predators, and she wouldn't stop fighting to keep children safe from people like me. 5 days later, Diane's office turned into a confession booth as 3 different ballet mothers showed up separately throughout the day. The first one, a woman I recognized but had never spoken to, sat crying as she explained how Karen had basically forced her to sign the petition by threatening to spread rumors about her own divorce. The second mother brought printed emails from a group chat where Karen had laid out detailed plans to remove the problem dad, dated 3 weeks before Lily even broke her ankle. The third woman, shaking as she spoke, described how Karen ran that ballet studio lobby like a dictator, how if you didn't agree with her about something, your kid would suddenly stop getting invited to birthday parties and playdates. Each one signed affidavits and agreed to testify if needed. Karen's deposition happened on a Tuesday morning, and I watched watched through the conference room window as she walked in wearing a business suit and her signature smirk. For the first 2 hours, she deflected every question, claiming she was just a concerned mother trying to protect children, that I was intimidating her by pursuing legal action, that any inconsistencies in her story were simple misunderstandings. Then Diane pulled out her laptop and played David's recording. I've never seen someone's face change color so fast, going from confident to pale to bright red in seconds. Karen jumped up screaming that the recording was illegal, demanding to speak to her lawyer privately, actually throwing her water bottle across the table before storming out. Her lawyer asked for a recess to reassess their position, which was legal speak for, "We're screwed." 3 days later, I got a call from the Ballet Academy's new director, who introduced herself and immediately launched into an apology about how the situation was handled. She said Ms. Reeves had been terminated and would never teach at their studio again, that they wanted to offer Lily free classes for a year plus a public apology, that things would be completely different now with new policies about parent involvement and zero tolerance for harassment. I thanked her, but when I asked Lily if she wanted to go back, she just shook her head and said that part of her life was over. The next miracle came when my wife called from her deployment to say her emergency leave had been approved for the upcoming court dates. When she walked through our front door 2 days later, Lily ran to her and wouldn't let go for almost an hour, both of them crying while I stood there watching my family together for the first time in months. That night, Lily slept through without a single nightmare, curled up between both her parents like she used to when she was really small. The cracks in Karen's support system started showing when several mothers from her group posted public apologies on the Ballet Academy's Facebook page, saying they'd been swept up in the hysteria and rushed to judgment without facts. Karen's response was to post their personal information, including phone numbers and addresses, on her private group page, telling her remaining followers these women were traitor enablers who chose a predator over children's safety. The way David secretly recorded Karen talking about her plan while she thought he was sleeping really shows how much their marriage must have been falling apart behind closed doors. One of those mothers called the police to file a harassment report after getting threatening messages, and suddenly the concerned mother protecting the community was being investigated for cyberstalking. The biggest breakthrough came when Jennifer Davis Park walked into Diane's office with her lawyer and a sworn affidavit describing exactly how Karen had threatened to destroy her daughter Grace's social life if she didn't support the accusations against me. She detailed how Karen had coached her on what to say to the police, how she'd been told to exaggerate any interaction she'd seen between me and the children, how Karen had created an atmosphere where disagreeing with her meant becoming a target yourself. After signing the papers, Jennifer asked if there was any way Grace and Lily could see each other again, because Grace had been asking about her friend every day since this started. We arranged a supervised playdate at a neutral location, and when those two little girls saw each other, they ran together and hugged so tight, both of them crying. Too young to really understand why they'd been kept apart, but old enough to know they'd missed each other terribly. The playdate lasted 2 hours, and watching those girls play like nothing had happened made me realize how much damage this whole mess had caused to innocent kids. 3 days later, my phone rang early in the morning with news I'd been waiting for. Detective Porter's voice sounded different, almost apologetic, as he told me Karen had been arrested for witness tampering. Jennifer's affidavit and the text messages she'd saved showed Karen threatening witnesses and trying to coordinate false stories. The local paper ran Karen's mugshot right next to the article they'd published about my case, and seeing her face on the arrest page felt like some kind of justice. Her remaining Facebook supporters claimed it was all retaliation, but the evidence was overwhelming, including screenshots of her trying to bribe other moms to change their stories. She got released on bail that same afternoon, but was banned from contacting any witnesses, which meant most of the ballet moms. Meanwhile, the bills kept piling up on my kitchen table, each envelope making my stomach drop a little more. $40,000 in legal fees, lost wages from taking time off work, therapy costs for Lily, all adding up to a number that made me dizzy. Angela called and suggested starting a GoFundMe, but I told her no way. I wasn't going to profit from this nightmare. My wife called from overseas that night and said she'd extended her deployment for the bonus pay, her voice breaking when she said we'd get through this even if it took years. 5 days later, we went to the hospital for Lily's cast removal appointment. The doctor cut through the plaster carefully, while Lily gripped my hand so tight her knuckles went white. Her ankle looked thin and pale when the cast came off, and she was scared to put weight on it at first. The physical therapist showed her exercises to rebuild strength, but I could see it was more about rebuilding her confidence than her muscles. On the drive home, Lily asked quietly if she could try soccer instead of ballet. I told her whatever makes you happy, sweetheart, though we both knew it wasn't really about preference anymore. That same week, David filed for divorce and custody of his daughters. The court documents cited Karen's erratic and harmful behavior, and he'd included documentation of her previous campaigns against other families, her threats, her admission of lying about me. Karen's carefully built world was falling apart piece by piece. She called my lawyer screaming that I'd destroyed her family, completely unable to see how her own actions had caused all of this. The school board scheduled a hearing about the principal's handling of Lily's bullying situation. Ms. Johnson testified about how the administration had ignored multiple reports and failed to protect my daughter from harassment. 3 days into the investigation, the principal announced early retirement rather than face the full review. The new principal they brought in promised zero tolerance for bullying regardless of parent situations, but it was too little too late for us. Then Karen made her biggest mistake yet. Despite her bail conditions, she posted about me in a new Facebook group she'd created under a fake name. Someone reported it within hours, and the police arrested her again, this time holding her without bail until trial. David got emergency custody of their daughters, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone that in trying to protect children, she'd lost her own. More families started reaching out with apologies over the next few days. Some seemed genuine, saying they'd been swept up in the mob mentality and regretted not speaking up. Others were clearly just trying to avoid being named in potential lawsuits. The damage to our community was everywhere you looked. Friendships of 20 years were destroyed, trust between neighbors shattered, and the Ballet Academy announced it was closing permanently, unable to recover from the scandal. Going back to work felt like walking into a minefield. battlefield. My colleagues were polite but kept their distance, some giving me looks that said they still wondered if there was truth to the accusations. Others were supportive but clearly uncomfortable, not knowing what to say or how to act around me. The stain of being accused, even when proven innocent, doesn't wash off easily. I focused on my work, trying to rebuild some kind of normal routine one day at a time. The civil trial started on a Tuesday morning with Karen's lawyer arguing she was just a concerned mother, acting in good faith to protect children. Our lawyer Diane stood up and systematically destroyed that story, with evidence of premeditation, malice, and Karen's pattern of targeting other families over the years. When they played Maria's video on the courtroom screen, showing Karen smirking as I was arrested, several jury members shook their heads in disgust. The judge allowed Lily to testify through closed-circuit video from another room so she wouldn't have to face Karen directly. My little girl sat in that chair, brave and clear, telling the judge how the mean mommies wouldn't let daddy help when she was hurt. She said they made everyone think he was bad, but he's the best daddy in the whole world. I watched the judge's face soften as Lily spoke, while Karen stared at the floor, refusing to look at the screen showing the child whose life she'd turned upside down. 3 days later, David took the stand and dropped a bomb that made everyone in the courtroom gasp. He pulled out a notebook from his jacket pocket and started reading names from what he called Karen's target list of parents she wanted gone from different activities around town. My name got added right after that first ballet class when I didn't immediately leave like she wanted. The list had 15 names total with notes next to each one about their offenses, and 5 of them had already been driven away from their kids' activities. David's hands shook as he read each name and explained how Karen would organize campaigns against these parents, always claiming safety concerns that never had any real basis. The detective testified next, and his whole attitude was different from that night he arrested me. He admitted he should have looked at my phone properly, should have asked more questions, should have noticed the inconsistencies in the mom's stories. He revealed that Karen had called the police station 6 times in the weeks before the incident, trying to file reports about me that kept getting dismissed as unfounded. She'd been hunting for someone to believe her story, and finally found a way to make it happen. 2 days later, during a lunch break, my wife held my hand in the courthouse cafeteria while we picked at sandwiches neither of us could really eat. She told me she was proud of me for fighting this instead of just finding another ballet school like most people would have done. I thought about all the money we'd spent, all the stress Lily had gone through, all the nights I couldn't sleep wondering if it was worth it. When Karen finally took the stand, she started confident, but fell apart fast under cross-examination. She admitted she'd exaggerated some things, admitted she'd organized the other moms to complain, admitted she'd coached them on what to say to the police, but she kept insisting she genuinely believed I was a threat based on her mother's intuition, even though she couldn't name a single actual thing I'd done wrong besides being a man at ballet class. Our lawyer asked her 3 times what evidence she had, and 3 times she had nothing except that men shouldn't want to watch little girls dance. The defense wrapped up with Karen's lawyer arguing she'd suffered enough already and deserved minimal damages, while our lawyer argued the damage to our family couldn't be measured in just money. The judge said he'd rule within the week, and we all filed out of the courtroom to wait some more. 5 days later, Karen got convicted in criminal court for witness tampering and sentenced to 2 years probation plus 200 hours of community service. The judge also ordered her to attend counseling to address what he called her concerning pattern of behavior toward other parents. Her Facebook support group went completely silent after that, and the moms who'd been posting about standing with her suddenly deleted all their comments. The crusader mom who'd been protecting kids became the cautionary tale about taking things too far. That same week, I signed Lily up for art class at the community center since she still couldn't dance with her ankle healing. When I dropped her off, the instructor didn't know anything about our story, and it felt so normal I almost cried, but I still caught myself watching the other parents, wondering if they were whispering about me, wondering if someone would start something again. That feeling of being watched, of being judged, it stuck to me like a bad smell I couldn't wash off. How did Karen manage to keep such detailed notes about 15 different families without anyone noticing for so long? David finding that target list makes me wonder if she kept other records too, maybe emails or photos documenting her campaigns against all those parents she drove away from activities. Angela organized a dinner at her house with the families who'd supported us through everything. Maria brought homemade pasta, Jennifer brought her kids to play with Lily, and Ms. Johnson came even though she'd lost her job at the Ballet Academy for speaking up for us. We didn't talk about the case at all, just ate and laughed and watched the kids play together in the backyard. For a couple hours, it felt like the community we should have had from the start, the one where parents support each other instead of tearing each other down. The civil verdict came on day 120, a Tuesday morning that started with rain and ended with $200,000 in damages for defamation and emotional distress. The judge also ordered Karen to publish a public apology in the local paper, which her lawyer immediately said they'd appeal, even though everyone knew they'd lose. The money wouldn't cover everything we'd spent on lawyers and therapy and medical bills, but seeing it in writing that we'd been wronged, that what happened to us was legally recognized as wrong, that mattered more than the check. Karen's public apology ran in the paper 3 days later, obviously written by lawyers with all the emotion of a grocery list, but there it was in black and white. I falsely accused Noah Thompson, followed by 2 paragraphs of legal language admitting she'd been wrong about everything. The online harassment stopped almost overnight because her followers realized they could be next if they kept attacking us. The Facebook group that had hundreds of members posting daily just disappeared, deleted by whoever was running it, and all those angry comments on local news stories got removed one by one. 3 weeks later, Diane called me at work to tell me Karen's appeal got rejected by the judge. She'd tried arguing the confession was forced, but the judge saw right through it since she'd signed it willingly with her own lawyer present. The best part was when Diane told me Karen filed for bankruptcy the same day to avoid paying us the damages. We both knew that meant we'd probably never see a penny of the $100,000 the court awarded us, but honestly, the money wasn't what mattered. Karen had lost her reputation, her friends, her social standing at the country club she loved so much, and from what David told me later, even her marriage was hanging by a thread. My boss called me into his office that same afternoon, and I thought I was in trouble, but instead he offered me a promotion with a $15,000 $100,000 raise. He said it was partly because I'd handled everything with professionalism, and partly because the company felt bad about what happened. The promotion came with an option to transfer to their Boston office, where nobody would know our story. That night when my wife called from the ship, I told her about it, and we talked for an hour about whether we should take it. She had 2 more weeks left on her deployment, but she was already thinking about fresh starts and new beginnings. Meanwhile, Lily's 7th birthday was coming up, and we had to decide about a party. She wanted one, but we worried nobody would come after everything that happened. We sent out 5 invitations to kids from her new school and waited. All 5 parents called back saying yes, which made Lily jump around the living room, even though her ankle still hurt sometimes. It wasn't the big party we'd planned before all this started, but it was something. David called me the next week to tell me Karen was moving to her sister's place in Ohio. He sounded tired and broken when he explained their daughters were in therapy, trying to understand why their mom hurt people. He offered to pay part of the judgment himself, even though the bankruptcy meant he didn't have to, but I told him no. The district attorney's office announced they were reviewing their bias training policies because of our case. Detective Porter was leading workshops now about avoiding rush to judgment, and he'd called me twice to apologize again. Ms. Reeves lost her teaching license and was working as a receptionist at a dental office according to someone who saw her there. The ripples kept spreading through all the institutions that had failed us. Then finally my wife's deployment ended, and we drove to the airport to pick her up. Lily practiced walking without her slight limp the whole drive there because she wanted to run to her mom perfectly. When we saw her in uniform coming through the gate, Lily took off running and only favored her bad ankle a little bit. My wife dropped her bags and caught her, spinning her around while I stood there watching them. We were together again and we'd survived, but none of us were the same people we'd been 6 months ago. That innocence we had before was gone forever. We decided to take the Boston transfer 2 days later. It wasn't running away, but choosing to write our next chapter somewhere new, where Lily could just be a kid instead of that girl whose dad got arrested. My wife found a job there within a week, and we put our house on the market. While packing up the garage, I found Lily's ballet shoes in a box I'd shoved in the corner months ago. She saw me holding them and asked if we could donate them to a girl whose daddy won't get in trouble for watching. The way she said it so matter-of-factly broke my heart, because 7-year-olds shouldn't understand things like that, but she did now. At her last therapy session in Fairfield, the psychologist warned us the trauma might come back later. She said triggers could include authority figures, false accusations, even ballet music on the radio. She gave us a list of therapists in Boston and said healing would take years, maybe decades. One woman's moment of hate had created consequences that would follow us forever. The moving truck came on a Tuesday morning, and neighbors watched from their windows as we loaded boxes. Some waved goodbye, but others just stared like we were a circus act. Mrs. Wilson Park brought cookies for the road and had tears in her eyes when she said she was sorry she wasn't braver sooner. Grace and Lily sat on the lawn making friendship bracelets and promising to write letters even though we all knew they probably wouldn't. The truck driver honked twice and pulled away while we stood there watching our whole life disappear down the street. 3 days before we actually left town, I took one last drive through Fairfield with my wife finally back from deployment and Lily in her booster seat. We passed the ballet academy first, and I slowed down when I saw the for lease sign in the window where those moms used to gather and whisper about me. The place looked dead inside with all the mirrors reflecting nothing but empty space and dust floating in the afternoon light. Next came the police station where they booked me that awful night while my daughter screamed for me from an ambulance and I couldn't even hold her hand. Then the courthouse where we spent months fighting to clear my name and watching Karen's lies fall apart piece by piece until even her own husband couldn't stand by her anymore. My wife reached over and squeezed my hand as we passed each place that held so much pain, but also showed us how strong we could be when everything tried to break us. Angela came by that last morning to help us clean the empty rooms, and she kept saying how proud she was that we never gave up even when the whole town turned against us. Most people would have broken, she said while we swept the kitchen floor one final time. I wanted to tell her I did break, over and over, in the bathroom at work, and in my car after court dates and late at night when Lily's physical therapy made her cry. But we kept putting ourselves back together because that's what families do when the world tries to tear them apart. Our last night in the empty house, we sat on the floor eating pizza straight from the box while Lily asked if there were mean mommies in Boston too. My wife looked at her carefully and said, "There are mean people everywhere, but now we know how to spot them and protect ourselves from their poison." Hard lessons for a 7-year-old to learn, but necessary after everything she'd been through. When moving day finally came and we drove away, Lily waved at our house from her car seat saying goodbye to it and apologizing that bad things happened there. The GPS showed Boston was 156 miles away, but it felt like we were traveling to another planet where nobody knew our names or our story. 2 weeks into our new life, Lily started at her new school, and when kids asked about her slight limp, she just said she broke her ankle dancing without mentioning the months of surgeries and therapy, or the moms who caused it all. Her teacher didn't know about the court case or the headlines or the death threats we got online. The other parents at pickup didn't whisper or stare or pull their kids away from mine. We were just another family in the crowd, and that invisibility felt like the greatest gift after months of being treated like criminals. I started my new position at the Boston office, and my boss mentioned on day one that corporate had told him why we relocated, but promised it was a clean slate here. My coworkers judged me on my spreadsheets and presentations instead of old news articles they found online. Slowly, I stopped tensing up when someone mentioned their kids' activities or asked what I did on weekends. A month into our Boston life, Lily made a friend named Olivia who invited her to try gymnastics at a local gym. I signed the permission slip without my hand shaking for the first time since this whole nightmare started. When I dropped her off and sat in the viewing area with other parents, nobody questioned why a dad was there or accused me of being dangerous. I watched my daughter laugh and attempt cartwheels with the other kids, just being normal again after so many months of being the girl whose dad got arrested at Ballet. Ms. Johnson losing her job for defending them really shows how speaking up takes real courage. I wonder if she knew she might get fired but did it anyway. Then a letter came from Jennifer Moore Park saying Grace missed Lily terribly, and they were moving too because Fairfield felt poisoned now. She wrote that many families had left or were planning to leave because the trust in the community was completely broken after what happened. Karen hadn't just destroyed individual families, families, but had torn apart the whole fabric of a town where neighbors now looked at each other with suspicion instead of friendship. 6 weeks after arriving in Boston, my wife and I went to parent-teacher conferences together, and the teacher said Lily was adjusting well and making friends, though she noticed our daughter was protective of kids who got picked on. Our little girl had learned too young that standing by while others get hurt is wrong, and now she stepped in when she saw unfairness happening. It was a hard lesson taught by trauma, but maybe it would make her stronger and kinder than she would have been otherwise. Saturday morning in our small Boston apartment, Lily practiced gymnastics moves in the living room while my wife cooked breakfast, and I sat with my laptop reading regular news instead of searching our names to see if new articles had been posted. "Dad, watch this," Lily called out and attempted a handstand against the wall. She wobbled but caught herself before falling and turned to me with the biggest smile. "Did you see, Daddy? I didn't fall." "No, baby, you didn't fall, and neither did we, despite everything they tried to do to destroy us. We're still standing." Had a great time just diving into all these questions with you today. It's always interesting seeing where the conversation goes. We'll do it again soon. Like the video, it helps more than you think.